Good afternoon. I'm Lauren Sonnenberg with LifeCore, and welcome to this week's edition of Mind Body Talk on chronic pain. And today we are talking about GNM, otherwise known as German New Medicine, on the topic of arthritis. So I've talked about German New Medicine in many of my weekly talks. I've mentioned arthritis a couple of times and the conflict involved with arthritis, but I never just did a one session just focused on arthritis. And I think for people who are new to understanding mind-body connection or newly delving into German New Medicine, you may be just looking for the topic of arthritis if that's the diagnosis that you have. So I thought, let's just target a couple of different diagnostic labels. That makes it easier for people to find and dive in and learn more about it. So let's first, in case you've never learned anything or heard about German New Medicine at all, maybe you're brand new to it. In short, what it talks about, very complex and beautiful science, but it talks about biological conflicts or bioemotional conflicts, and we'll define one especially today, that creates a biological program within the body. This conflict hits you, impacts you on some level, and it sets a biological program running in the body. And if the conflict is able to be resolved, we see then a two-phase program that runs: the conflict active phase, the conflict resolution or healing phase. So when we're talking about arthritis, and if you have arthritis, you're probably very aware that this is impacting the joints of your body, or a joint or multiple joints of your body. So the conflict, according to German New Medicine, and also I have a link in the header above the video that has a link to information about German New Medicine, so you can start learning about it and delving more into it, and just reading piece by piece through it. That's going to be helpful to you too. With German New Medicine, the conflict involving the bones and the joints would be a severe self-devaluation conflict. And I'm going to define that for you. That could be a loss of self-worth. We're going to get into some other finer definitions here, but I just want to also say before we do that, that a lighter self-devaluation conflict would impact cartilage, tendons, and ligaments. And then a medium self-devaluation conflict would impact lymph nodes or muscles. So now we talk about self-devaluation conflicts. If we're talking about, we can talk about them in terms of being generalized, or we can talk and kind of whole person, kind of impacting the whole person, or we can talk about them in a more localized way. So, for example, if a person is being physically, emotionally, sexually abused, that is likely to impact a person as a whole person, whole body. Okay, humiliation, feeling ongoing sense of shame and guilt, that's going to be largely experienced as on the whole of the person. Same with, oftentimes you'll have like feeling like a failure, not feeling good enough, maybe as a parent, for example, or as an athlete, or in whatever role you're in. Could be at work. We could be talking about performances. It could be something like, a musician or an athlete, as I mentioned, but it could be, your performance as a parent or as a partner. So it also is something we'll see a lot of times related to the aging process, feeling not as worthy as you did before for whatever reasons. Now we'd have to look with each person that those reasons may be very individualized. It's not the same across the board per se. Maybe one person feels that way because, maybe it's because they've lost someone in their lives who helped to build them up, and yet another person feels that way because they can't. Maybe they've had an accident or injury, and this can become more localized at first, but then it becomes generalized, and now like it's just snowballed, and like their whole life is kind of impacted in a way that just makes them feel not worthy on the whole. So ongoing limiting beliefs. I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. I'm not going to succeed. It's not possible. And so those types of beliefs, if they're internalized, and they normally start off with an event, we may not notice it at first, but they normally start off with an event and they tend to grow and snowball. Those are all under the umbrella of self-devaluation. Now, a more targeted or localized self-devaluation may be maybe an artist is trying a new technique and it didn't quite turn out, or for some reason they're just not feeling inspired. Maybe something else in their life is not going so well, and they're just not feeling passionate, that they've done a couple of drawings and they feel like, oh man, my work is crap right now. And so that's internalized maybe in the hands as a self-devaluation. Or somebody, maybe an athlete, they weren't up to par, so to speak, and they started they did a shot, a basketball throw, or they missed a catch in football or baseball, and a pass or a catch, I guess those are the right terms. So and they feel worthless within their hands. Now this can impact different parts of the body depending upon what we're talking about. Somebody who plays an instrument, that type of thing. What else might we see with a localized self-devaluation conflict? Really important, we'll see a lot of times cancer diagnoses may make a person feel not okay in that area. I'm broken down, I'm weak, I'm not okay, I'm not strong enough in that area. So this is why you can see you'll see why we have bone loss, for example. You can see why that a person, when they get a diagnosis, it could definitely end up internalizing as a localized self-devaluation conflict in addition to whatever else is going on. But if you have, say, a mastectomy, even after that breast tissue is removed, a lot of times you'll see people who have the bone is impacted nearby, and it's diagnosed, if there's a cell loss going on, a lot of times that's diagnosed as a bone cancer. So secondary to whatever else was going on, even if there is a loss of the breast itself, if there's a mastectomy. So that's an example of how we can see these localized self-devaluation conflicts showing up in the body. And even pain itself makes a person feel like if it's an ongoing pain in that body, it can then create its own ongoing self-devaluation conflict. I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough in that part of my body, it's not healing, it's not functioning. So let's get into what actually is happening. Okay, so let's pull out our handy dandy German New Medicine sheet here. Okay, and what you see here, if I can I can never go the right direction with this. It's actually in the right direction for you, but then it has me turned around. But I'm glad you could see it. So if I can get my little pointer going in the right direction, if I did it every day, I'd have this down pat. So here we are going along our lives, just normal, 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 and then poof, something happens, an event where we're feeling activated with a conflict, and in this case, the self-devaluation conflict. Okay. Here's where we're conflict active. And in this phase, during this conflict activity, with a severe self-devaluation conflict that is impacting bones and joints, hence why we're talking about the German new medicine on arthritis today, it starts to decalcify the bones and the joints. And this creates little gaps because the cells start to break down. So little gaps, little holes. This is where the cells break down. This is exactly what is the initiator of osteoporosis. Okay. So we could have problems if that continues, of course. But if you have an arthritis diagnosis, what's happening then is that, let's get the picture going the right way and the pointer going the right way. So you come here to this conflict resolution piece here, and you get into this healing phase. You see this healing phase here. And in that healing phase, providing you're able to resolve that conflict, and we'll talk about resolution of the conflict in a bit here. Let's not even, before we talk about chronic arthritis, let's talk about arthritis in a one-time event, because in theory, if we all knew German new medicine and we all knew to identify that self-devaluation conflict heading into the first bout of arthritis, and we were able to fully resolve it without having any interruption, what would happen is that you would feel the process of the recalcification of those lost cells in the bones and the joints. So, what accompanies that? Well, you have edema, you have swelling, you have that fluid, you have inflammation. You're going to have an increased blood flow to that area because it's going to bring more nutrients into that area. That part of the body is healing. It's recalcifying, it's regrowing. It's only going to replace what was lost during the self-devaluation conflict, but it's a pretty big deal. It's it's basically reconstituting that part of the body. So in arthritis, we can be talking about the hips, the knees, the fingers, the elbows, shoulders. I think I said that one. So you use those. I mean, we use all parts of our body, I guess, a lot, but I mean, it's very noticeable when even there's the littlest bit of stiffness there. You notice that. I mean, we just even standing here talking, I move my hands a lot, if you haven't noticed. So you feel that in your fingers if that's where your arthritis is. So you don't even need to be doing something highly active to be moving those parts of your body. So you feel that swelling, this body, and if you don't know German new medicine, you're going to think, wow, there's something wrong with me. This part of my body is doing things that it never did before, and something's wrong. Now that could create its own, new self-devaluation. That could just keep it going right there, just that in and of itself. But so there's power in knowing this, about knowing the science of German new medicine, because at that point we say, okay, there's a reason there's this inflammation. There's a reason there's this pain. There's a reason there's this swelling. Okay. Now, when bones are being reconstructed, you have this soft callus that's formed. They're produced by the osteoblasts, okay? And over time, that softer bone that's being created, then that callus, softer bone, will eventually harden. Unfortunately, it has been a lot of times if people go in, if something's being, if there's a surgery and you go in and look at it, they'll see it a lot of times as it might be not looked at as something helpful, so it might look like pus and be removed. Okay. This doesn't help the healing process. And then it's going to leave that part of the body less strong if it's able to at least finish that healing process as much as possible in light of what's been taken away. Let me just put out a little reminder here that this is educational information. I'm not telling you you should or shouldn't do any procedure medically. Just telling you that a lot of times GNM looks at it in a different way than conventional medical knowledge might approach it. So just to say that, okay? And let me also say that that can be scary for people when they're hearing something that kind of flies counter to what everything they've heard before. Let's acknowledge that that's hard. Sometimes it's scary, sometimes it's confusing. It brings about a lot of emotions, quite frankly. I mean, working with people who are approaching things through a GNM lens and really working on the whole mind body through that lens, or trying to at least try it on for size, so to speak, and see their world through a new lens when it comes to their mind body wellness. It can be definitely a challenge because the people around you, most of the people around you, aren't necessarily looking at it through that same lens. There's, you know, there's a lot of conventional medical knowledge around us, and so it's probably really hard to see it from this new light, this new perspective. So now, okay, most people aren't going to know first time they get arthritis that that they could continue, they could just allow that healing process to continue and complete. And even if they did, sometimes the original conflict is reactivated before they complete that process. Sometimes, so we have what do you call it? That's where your chronic arthritis comes about, because there's something that interrupts the healing process and we're not able to complete that arthritic response, because it would go back to normal. Things would normalize then. So what do we do with that information? And we're going to get to that part. I'm going to end with that part today. I was going to talk about, all in today's presentation, a couple of other arthritis related terms and what that means in light of GNM, but I decided, since there's a bulk of them, that we'll talk about those next week. Then the week after that, we're going to talk about specific conflicts related to different parts of the body, like the bones and joints, different parts of the body, because they are all slightly different and very targeted. And so I already gave you a long list of different types of self-devaluation conflicts today, but we're going to then talk about those, like I said, not next week, but the week after, so you have that. And then we're going to talk about gout the week after that. And gout is an arthritis plus one other notable conflict. So stay tuned, because we have week 2, 3, and 4 after today's presentation lined up, and it's all related to this self-devaluation conflict that we're talking today, this severe self-devaluation or loss of self-worth conflict. So so in terms of stopping this process of the chronicity, we need to look at, okay, we have things that can interrupt it. We can have not knowing that the pain itself is a healing, which creates its own new self-devaluation conflict, which starts you in the conflict active cycle, and it gets you back in. Most likely, generally there's you feel a little reprieve, and then you go back into having the full-on pain in the healing process again, so that becomes cyclical. You could have the original conflict reactivated before you're able to complete the healing process. You could have a combination of those two. There are other things I've talked about, tracks before, other things that get linked in that remind you of the original conflict and then start you back in the conflict active phase quickly, and then you get right back into the healing phase. So there are a lot of things that make this cyclical or make it into a chronic arthritis instead of a once and done experience. So how do we stop that then? How do we stop that cycle? First and foremost, we have to be armed with the knowledge that the pain is a healing sign when we're talking about this, when we're talking about arthritis and many of the other chronic pain experiences. I've talked about different kinds, but you'll hear a lot of times the pain is in the healing phase. Not all cases, but many. Okay, so you could stop it sometimes through the knowledge and awareness of it alone. Sometimes that's powerful enough, knowing the German new medicine and really starting to see the cycle, like, oh, I know I had that conflict happen right before this flare-up. I'm beginning to see this cycle, I'm aware of it, and I start to believe it to be true and understand it to be true. So that's one helpful way. A second helpful way, if there are ways to practically resolve the conflict, great. German New Medicine is all about practical solutions to our conflicts where possible. And if not practically through a practical solution, then through an understanding, like psychologically and or emotionally. And now, in terms of emotional resolution and emotional healing, and this is not something that German New Medicine talks about, so I'll preface with that. But in my own practice, I use EFT, which is the emotional freedom techniques, aka tapping at different acupressure points while we're saying statements specific to. For example, let's see if we identified an ongoing self-devaluation, like a limiting belief, like I'm not good enough because, and then we identify what that because is. We'll find the event or events that relate to why that belief has become true for a person, and we'll work on resolving that so that we're not just trying to resolve the present conflict in the moment. That's important, sure. But what we want to do is help a person become strong and feeling healed on an emotional, is strong the right word? Yes and no. We want to help them feel empowered. That's a much better word. We want to help them feel empowered to, let's just say they're faced with something, a trigger that would normally create a self-devaluation conflict within them. We want to help people become empowered enough so that in the future, if it happens again, that we're not just keeping on trying to, we go through this process again, go through this process again. What if we get the person feeling, what if we help the person get themselves feeling empowered enough so that some of these conflicts coming forward that maybe set them in onto a mind-body program, a biological program, as German New Medicine shows us before, if you heal that on a deep enough level, a person it'll be more like water off a duck's back then, or it won't hit them as hard. Now remember also that there's a biological reason for why we see these responses in German New Medicine. And the reason on a biological level is to make the body stronger. To make the body stronger, in this case, in order to feel more able to deal with these conflicts. So it says, hey, if you have another conflict in your life or not, doesn't matter. We're making the organism, in this case a human being, stronger if it happens again. And for all the different types of things that happen in the body, diseases, quote unquote diseases, biological programs that the body runs, whether we're talking about cancer or a head cold or whatever, there is always a function for it. There's always a function to make the organism, an animal or human, as strong, or it's not always strong, to make them optimal, to put them in an optimal position in order to be able to survive and to do well and survive well in life. And so that's the power and the beauty of this. And anybody who knows me or who's been watching any of these videos know I get a little pumped up about it, because this is a wonderful thing, because it totally shifts. This is a total paradigm shift. Here I thought my arthritis was a bad thing, and now I see it's actually a healing process. It's here to help me become better able to handle these conflicts that are coming my way. Wow, that's a game changer. Just awareness of that alone, if that sinks in and hits you to be true, and oh wow, you could see a healing response. You could see your pain actually flare up once you internalize that and realize, oh my, this is actually a healing process. Let's just say you haven't had a flare up for a while. Oof, you might, because it's helping you to, well, if you see it to be true, it's going to have that response. Your body's going to have that response, your mind body, and it's driven by the brain. Now, speaking of the brain, before we close up for today, you can actually, you see these different conflicts lighting up the relay location related to that part of the body that's involved, the organ or tissue that's involved with any of the conflicts we see. There's actually a relay location in the brain. There's a map. And if you knew nothing else about a person and you knew how to read these brain scans according to German New Medicine, you would actually know exactly what's going on for the person. You would know based on where you see it. There's actually a crossover when they're talking about bones, for example. So if you have a bone on the left side of your body that's impacted arthritically, you're going to see it on the right side of the brain, and vice versa. And you can also predict then, you'll know if the conflict is related to a mother-child related conflict, or partner side, which is anybody else besides mother-child, and you know which hand's dominant for a person. You do the clap test, whatever hand's on top, that it's not always your writing hand, it often is. If you know the science of GNM, based on the information there, you'll be able to predict which side of the body. It'll always make sense. And if you're not sure what the conflict stemmed from, this will help you track it. So, so you can literally see all of this on a brain scan if you know what you're looking for. So this is not it's not a philosophy. It's actually a very predictable science. You know, the conflict resolution I find to be that's a challenging part for people, because conflicts are not always just magic wand, easy, cheesy breezy, resolve them. But if you have methods that work, and you're persistent in resolving them, resolving the conflicts, all of them that are involved with any chronic illness, meaning if you're persistent about resolving the emotional conflicts or bioemotional conflicts involved with any of these responses, you will see results. You will see results. And it's a process for a lot of people. It's a process, especially when people have had symptoms for a long time, because there are layers sometimes. Not always, it's not always that complicated, but there are layers. So you have to be a little patient. But it's to know this information is to become more free, is to become more liberated, because a lot of times people feel stuck in their pain as if there's no way that they could ever get better. And so if anything that we talked about today sparked interest, and maybe you have chronic illness or chronic pain yourself, like chronic arthritis or something along the lines, any chronic pain, I have a group. It's a free Facebook group. It's Chronic Pain Mind Body Empowerment Group, and I have the link above the video. So feel free to join. You can ask any questions you want there. My goal is to really help people create this new mind-body awareness with this information that I talk about weekly, and to really help people figure out what it is that they need to do as part of their healing process, at least to give them a good idea. Obviously, I can't go in and do the micro work that I do in my individual sessions, on a group level, but at least provide a person a framework and an understanding that they may not have had prior to. So thank you so much for joining me here today. I see that Jennifer and Daryl stopped by, so thanks for joining in. And if anybody has any questions, I guess I should ask that before I close up here, but I don't see anything coming through right yet. So again, just to talk about the timeline, I don't always tell you what I'm going to be doing the next week, but it just made sense for us to talk about the comparative types. There are different versions of arthritis in terms of arthritic diagnoses that you see conventionally discussed. And so we want to talk about those through the lens of German new medicine next week. For example, like osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, polyarthritis, those types of things. We want to talk about those so you understand that as well, especially if you have one of those diagnoses. You want to understand, okay, what does that mean in terms of German new medicine and from a mind-body perspective. The week after that, we're going to talk about really specifically the different types of conflicts based on what part of the body we're talking about, what bone of the body or what region of bones in the body we're talking about. And then something that may seem to not be totally connected, but really is in a big way, would be gout. The following week after that, we're going to talk about gout, because gout is arthritis plus one more conflict from a German new medicine perspective. So thanks again for watching. I really appreciate your time, whether you're seeing this on live or if you're catching the replay. And we'll see you next week. Thanks again. Bye-bye.